Welcome to the Virtual Sangha podcast from virtualsangha.org. Looking to learn more about Buddhism and connect with friends on the path? Or maybe you're an experienced practitioner and you enjoy keeping a beginner's mind. Wherever you're at in your journey, you're invited to visit virtualsangha.org to browse our resources there and connect with our supportive and inclusive community on Discord. Find the link in the show notes for more information. And now, on with the show.
I take refuge in the Buddha, the one who shows me the way in this life. Buddham Saranam Gacchami. I take refuge in the Dharma, the way of understanding and of love. Dhammam Saranam Gacchami. I take refuge in the Sangha, the community that lives in harmony and awareness. Sangham Saranam Gacchami. Homage to the Blessed One, the Exalted One, the fully enlightened Lord Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa.
We are starting the book club with the great disciples of the Buddha, their lives, their work, and their legacy, edited and with an introduction by Bhikkhu Bodhi. And today we're just going over the introductory part. We'll actually get into the chapters next week. Before we get into the introduction by Bhikkhu Bodhi, I wanted to reflect a little bit just on the title. So I'm sharing this on my screen in Discord. The great disciples of the Buddha, their lives, their work, and their legacy. I hope that through maybe through the course of this introduction, or definitely at least through the course of the book as we go through it, you might be able to identify yourself more with this. The cover art that we see on this book is an assembly of monks, and they're all male, they're all shaven heads, and they're all monastics. And the subtitle is Their Lives, Their Works, and Their Legacy, which can make it feel like we are separate from them. Do you look at this assembly of monks and see something that you can relate to? Maybe you are not monastic. Maybe you're a woman. Maybe there's some kind of sense of separation between who you are and the idea of Buddhist discipleship or the great disciples. And what would it take for us to be able to look at this and see something relatable, something inspirational that can be used to guide our own study and practice, so that this can be a guide for our lives, our works, and our legacies. So, going into the introduction to this book, like I pointed out, at first glance, you might think that it is mainly about male monastics or these saints with miraculous psychic powers that is removed from us, not only in spiritual attainment, but also in time, that this is about things that happened in ancient India and has nothing to do with us today. But as is stated in the introduction, a disciple is not necessarily a monk or even a nun, but is someone who is engaged with the words of the Buddha, someone who orients their life around those wholesome intentions. One of the quotes that I highlighted to look at today is: those who accept the Buddha as teacher and attempt to follow his path are Shravaka, his disciples. The category of being a disciple or being a Shravaka is not divided between lay and monastic. It embraces the fourfold assembly of monks, nuns, laymen, and lay women. The Buddha taught different forms of practice on the path as were appropriate for people's various conditions in life. And the path belongs to everybody in all walks of life. So Bhikkhu Bodhi explains that the word Shravaka just means someone who declares the Dharma, who declares the Buddha to be their teacher. In some other commentary, it's translated slightly differently. A Shravaka is one who hears the words of the Buddha. And whether you translate Shravaka as someone who speaks the Dharma or as someone who hears the Dharma can have slightly different implications, because the idea of Shravakas being the hearers of the Dharma could create a sense of isolation, that it only refers to people who were alive at the time of Gautama Buddha, who actually physically heard him deliver the teachings. So sometimes you'll see that idea of Shravakas or voice hearers used to separate early Buddhists from later Buddhists. And that's just an implication of a choice that some translators make. Bhikkhu Bodhi chooses to translate it as those who speak the the Dharma, the teachings of the Buddha. I'm not 100% sure which is the best translation, so I prefer to think of a Shravaka as someone who engages with the words of the Buddha, because that could be hearing or speaking, but it also emphasizes the necessity to implement the Dharma in your practice and not just let it be words. Because there are plenty of people who heard the Buddha teach, but then were not converted. They were not convinced. They were attached to their own views. They didn't change their views based on the words of the Buddha, and they didn't change their behavior. So it's possible for people to hear the words of the Buddha and to even repeat it, because we also have examples of that in the suttas of people who took the words of the Buddha and repeated them somewhere else in a sort of misrepresenting kind of way. And so you can hear and speak the Dharma, but if you're not engaged with it in your practice, that to me would be someone who's not necessarily a disciple, but is just treating the words of the Buddha as just rhetorical devices and not as a guide for practice. So, how do you relate to the word Shravaka? And is it something that you feel resonates with your own identity and your own practice? Or is it something that feels far away and remote and is something that only belongs to a certain slice of time in India thousands of years ago? So far, I've emphasized that the term Shravaka, the term disciple, is not necessarily exclusive to monks or to men. It includes laymen, laywomen, nuns. But the suttas do separate the disciples into two different classes. We have the noble disciples, and we have the um, regular disciples. So you have disciple, you have the Shravaka, and then you have the noble disciple, the Arya Shravaka. So a Shravaka is somebody who is engaging with the Dharma, but they still have all of these fetters and impurities, and they haven't really understood it yet. Maybe they're just kind of going through the motions of practice until they get it. And that's fine. That's where we all need to start out. A noble disciple, the Arya Shravaka, is someone who has directly seen the Dharma. It is someone who has entered the stream of the Dharma. But again, even the designation as an Arya disciple is not exclusive to monastics. Lay people are also recognized as Arya Shravakas. One inspiring aspect about this book and these stories of the disciples' lives is the opportunity for all of us to get involved and to bring our talents and our skills to the assembly. So, I'm beating a dead horse here with the, you know, lay involvement, the potential for lay excellence in the Sangha. But one of the things that is mentioned in this introduction is the idea of chief disciples. So there are various skills, different ways that you can serve the community, and there are um, stories such as in Anguttara Nikaya 114. This one is Chief Sutta, where it describes 80 categories of great disciples. There are 47 among the bhikkhus, 13 among the bhikkhunis, so that's, the monks and the nuns, and then 10 each among male and female lay followers. So for each of these categories of skills, someone in the community is appointed the chief, the most talented in that skill. Quoting here from Bhikkhu Bodhi, for example, among the monks, there is one who is foremost among those with a gentle voice, one who is foremost among those who compose spontaneous poetry, one who is foremost among those who have gone forth out of faith. Among the nuns, there is one who is foremost in wisdom, one who is foremost in psychic powers, one who excels in mastery over discipline, one who is foremost in energy, one who is foremost in the recollection of past lives. Among laymen, there is the chief patron. So this would be like the chief fundraiser. Um, we have the foremost preacher, one who is foremost in attracting a following. So these are like financiers, influencers, public relations, all of these roles for lay people that we would think of as being necessary for the success of a corporation today existed in the time of the Buddha. And he recognized, okay, this layperson is really great at connecting us with funding. This person is really great at delivering a Dharma talk, being a preacher. So Chita, the householder, is an example of one who is foremost in preaching, one who is foremost in attracting a retinue, a following, organizing followers. So if you feel like you're a layperson and you have the energy and the interest to be involved, those opportunities existed in the time of the Buddha, and they should exist today if we are continuing to follow that tradition. Unfortunately, some communities have developed a sort of male monastic only sort of dynamic. There are places and people who argue that a sangha refers only to male monastics, that it does not include lay people, and that there's no legitimate ordination of nuns anymore. And that's very unfortunate because we can see that people across all walks of life have the motivation to do wholesome works. And as an organization, the Buddhist Sangha should be creating opportunities for those people to do things. And we mirror that in the Dharma Teacher Order and in the virtual Sangha and at the Fapwin Temple. So we do that in big ways and in small ways. We have the Dharma Teacher Order uh, education with the Buddha Dharma Studies Institute, where any layperson can join, and monastics, we have monastics in there too, can take the course and participate and find opportunities to volunteer or maybe go from there into chaplaincy work uh, with the virtual sangha. Even with this podcast and our book club, we have friends in the community who occasionally volunteer to read, um, to share with others, to give a few minutes of their time to record something and share it with other people. And um, it's really awesome to see that. We have one of our friends here in the community that we all know is Ted. Ted does the fourth Sunday of each month. He's here reading and reciting and sharing the Dharma with us. And I'm, I thought about as I was reading this, I was like, who in our community would be chief for what? What is Simone the chief of? What is Jace foremost in? What is Lemmy foremost in? What is Ted foremost in? So if we had all of these posts of chief disciples, where could we see ourselves in that, and what can we do? And you don't have to be the best in the world. You just have to be the most sincere and dedicated person in the room at it. So if there is an opportunity to do something and you step up to that opportunity, then you are stepping into that leadership position for that moment, for that time and place. So these are some of the ways that the stories of the disciples, to me, are not just dead stories of things that people did 1,000, 2,000, 500 years ago. These are the stories of people who are role models because they saw that something needed to be done and they stepped up to do it. And they demonstrated excellence in doing that through their dedication and their service. And they were recognized and provide that kind of blueprint for how we can do the same thing. One final note that I'll offer about the disciples is that uh, they can be a source of aspiration, and they can also be a subject of reverence. We talk about the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, and we look to the Buddha, and it's Buddhism. That's what we're studying: Buddha, Buddha, Buddha. But there can be an opportunity for us to have more examples in looking at the disciples and taking inspiration from them as well. And the bodhisattvas, and there are plenty of sources of inspiration, but this is a traditional part of Buddhism that goes back to and even predates the enlightenment of Shakyamuni Buddha. So, for example, two of the most well-known disciples of the Buddha, um, Shariputra and Ananda, they made the aspiration through many lifetimes to serve the Buddha. And if you get into the suttas and the Jataka tales, you'll read about the past lifetimes of Shariputra and Ananda and the Buddha. And the way it's presented in this introduction by Bhikkhu Bodhi is that there were past Buddhas, and these disciples saw another chief disciple, and they were inspired, and they said, one day I want to be the chief disciple to serve a Buddha. So they were inspired in whatever lifetime they were taking. It might not even have been human. They might have been animal, and they might have been overhearing something. The Jataka tales are full of animal stories. So they were inspired by a disciple, and they said, I want to do that in a future life. And they set that as their goal, and they made that their aspiration. And then, as a result of lifetimes of that dedication, they eventually achieved that station of chief disciple. So it may look like they rose the ranks very quickly, or they were immediately enlightened, or something like that. So um, there there is a story that is mentioned in this introduction where there are some rather junior disciples that the Buddha appoints in a chief-like position. And the other disciples are like, "Why did you pick those guys? They have not been part of the order as long as we have. They are not as old as we are. They are not as experienced as we are. Why did you pick them?" And the Buddha says that you're thinking that they are junior only because you're seeing them in this lifetime. They have actually been practicing for many lifetimes. And we could get into the idea of literalism in rebirth and all that, and secular and traditional, and I'm not trying to go down a rabbit hole of rebirth stories and karma going from lifetime to lifetime. But one thing that I hope to offer there is an example that it's never too late to start. You don't know what the big picture is all the time. You may think, "Oh, I'm I'm unworthy, I'm inexperienced," but you may look inexperienced or whatever if you just put on paper the chronology of this lifetime from birth to death, from birth to present. But if you were able to see a bigger picture, you might have a different appreciation for the depth of experience that you have had in that short amount of time, or that you have inherited through your encounters with elders, or that you've had because during those years you were very actively engaged, as opposed to somebody who maybe has been practicing for a long time, but has not been really sincere in their application of energy. So, the opportunity for you to see yourself and the potential that you can have as a member of the community to be of service to others should not be limited by a perception that, well, other people have been doing it longer. Who am I? I should just sit down and be quiet. Or, oh, uh, um, I'm a layperson, or, I don't look like the person who's teaching right now. So please don't let any of those things hold you back. That is my introduction to this our book, The Great Disciples of the Buddha. I hope that you see it not as stories of people from far away, long ago, India, but that these are stories that you can find inspiring for your personal practice here and now. So, with that, I'm going to close out and share the merit.
Reciting the sutras, practicing the way of awareness, gives rise to benefits without limit. We vow to share the fruits with all beings. We vow to offer tribute to parents, teachers, friends, and numerous beings who give guidance and support along the path.